Now, you are an expert in fintech in Africa. Ovamba is one of the leaders in that. Before we get to what you do, I've just done a podcast, which actually launches tomorrow, about women in technology. And one of the people I interviewed was an amazing woman called Mariam Jam. I've been interviewing here for Hub Culture for a number of years. She started off her career at 24 writing a letter to Geldof and Bono saying, Africans need to be in control of their own narrative. Why aren't you including us in the conversation? Now, I know you have some strong opinions on that. Let loose.
How loose?
You can go as loose as you want.
Thank you, Edie. And I wish I had had the pleasure of meeting Miss Mariam. I can only imagine that she probably lives in a corner of my head. If I had been as brave as her at 24, maybe life would be very different, not just for me, but for many other Africans. It takes us a very long time to understand what it truly means to own narrative. Now, I think she's absolutely right. I had a very weird conversation one day when I was in the United States trying to buy some equipment to take back to my office in Cameroon. And the woman said to me, oh, where are you going with all of this stuff? And I explained that I have an office and I have a corporate flat in Douala, Cameroon. Oh, wow, I've been saving up to go to Africa for so long now. I said, oh, really? What's your big plan there? Well, I can't wait to feed all the starving babies.
Right.
So I paused and I thought, just how far do I go in slashing this poor young woman's dreams to threads? And I thought, I'll go 110%. And I said to her, would you be upset if I told you there aren't as many babies with flies on their faces? And she said, I would. I've been saving up for a really long time. Now then, this narrative is indicative of what is going on in the subtext of many people's minds. Bono, Bob, Geldof, and many others who are very well-intentioned have a dynamic in their head that, as with other human beings, there's hierarchy involved. There is no way that poor people can be considered poor if rich people aren't helping them. And they believe that as helping other individuals makes them better. That's one narrative. But when it comes to Africa, the idea that African governments and leaders are not doing a terribly good job, people believe they ought to step in and help where they can. But as with all matters related to globalization, you have to bring us to the table because there are some things that you have to offer that we probably don't want.
I think one of the things is that this idea of diversity and inclusion, we don't actually need to talk about diversity in some ways because the world is diverse.
It is completely
It is
diverse.
about inclusion. It is about bringing people to the table so that everybody can rise up together. Tell me about what you do in Ovamba that helps that. Tell me about financial inclusion.
Yes. Financial inclusion is the name given to fintech. Well, that's financial technology, but inclusion talks about the ability to democratize opportunity, the ability to make finances, financial services, access, and literacy a human right to all of those that wish to operate a business in order to feed self, family, community, and in my opinion, the world. Because we do have the platform based on landmass, human beings, and all of the intelligent things that are going on with tech hubs and development and innovation. Now, with what Ovamba does, we have decided to focus on Africa's missing middle. We've got plenty of wonderful solutions for the very tiny and the micro, and there are lots of solutions for private-public partnerships and all of these large infrastructure deals. But somewhere in the middle are people like you and me and anybody else that you know who have no opportunity to get a job or have decided to take the route of entrepreneurship. And within that respect, there are technologies and capital that need to be put in place to assist them with going from small to medium to large, because people do stay very stuck exactly where we are. We fund businesses who are in the supply chain and trade and commodities sector with about $500,000 per transaction. And we help them by buying the inventory that they need to sell. But it's not enough to give emerging markets money. Can you imagine, you know the story of people who win the lottery after they were really poor, they go back to being poor, right? But you need to give education, support, and technology is a great delivery of that, and all of the services like logistics and warehouses to help them smooth out cash flow, help them buy and manage more inventory, to make them a better risk so that international investors stop looking at us as, ooh, a little bit dangerous not going over there.
Right.
But yes, I can see that the yield in Africa is steady, is predictable and reliable, and there's transparency.
Give me an example of a transaction that you would help happen, a specific thing, start to finish.
Should we talk about a female customer or a male customer?
I think we should talk about a female customer.
I like that idea. All righty. I'll talk about two really briefly. One of them is our favorite. She sells glass. She is not a university educated woman. She actually started out with a small painting and decorating store, and she had glass. She used to have to go to her bank, her microfinance institution, and she could never get very large quants of money. They have an underwriting algorithm that says women, they're not really business owners, so they are a little bit harder on them. She came to us and explained that I have this ambition, I really want to grow my store. So Ovamba started out by buying the paint and the decor and the equipment that she needed. We imported it, we covered the cost of the importation, and she never had enough warehousing space. So just like Airbnb and this wonderful sharing economy, we have a digitized platform that tells us where all the empty warehouses are in our portfolio. So we were able to put her things in another warehouse where there was more space so that she could get a market share that would give her real growth that is truly measurable. Now, if she'd gone to her bank, she would have had to wait for the goods to come in from China. She would have had to wait to actually sell it, pay back the bank, hope she's got enough left over to do it again. And that puts you in a really bad cash flow situation. That is the biggest challenge to businesses, regardless of market. Today, she's branched into glass. We've brought in 3, 4, 5, 6 containers at a time. Before those containers of glass are sold, our algorithm and her retail rotation tells us that she's going to run out by such and such time. So we buy more. What she does is buy those goods back from us over a 6-month, 1-year period of time with fees built in for the service. She's become one of the biggest glass sellers in the region. We're so proud of her. She's absolutely brilliant.
Amazing.
And that wouldn't have happened if she'd just gone to a bank.
Okay. Now, you said that was one example.
That
You've
was
got
one
another?
example. Yes, our very first customer, who will always have a great place in my heart. She, very smart young woman. She is a pharmacist. Her contract is to supply antiviral HIV AIDS medication in the region. But every time she tried to apply for capital, they would say, "You're a scientist, you're not a business owner, so we're not going to lend you any money." So she was never able to show that she could execute these transactions very well. When she came to us, it was August the 12th of 2014. And that was the first transaction that we ever did, syndicated with microfinance institution. It was only $24,000, but it was the first time that she was able to keep her own money in the bank and actually get and satisfy a contract, which gave her a chance to do more contracts. We no longer do business with microfinance institutions because the lack of innovation within the banking sector
That's interesting.
makes it very difficult for them to scale at the speed that businesses are in need of.
So that was my next question, is
Right.
that it sounds like, and when I speak to people about how we're going to achieve the Sustainable Development Goals, there are a lot of disparate initiatives around, a lot of businesses growing. The issue is if we are going to achieve, for example, eradicating poverty, educating all, gender equality, the scaling up that's necessary and the investment in these areas needs to be at a higher level. So
Yes.
what evidence do you see of that from your standpoint?
We approach our business solutions from the standpoint of ecosystem development. And I do see pockets of growth. You're so absolutely accurate, Edie. There, on the one hand, you've got fintech for banks. On the other hand, you've got payment. On the other hand, you have SDG goals that are pertaining to poverty eradication, as you said, equality, bringing women to the table. But if you have an ecosystem that doesn't allow a velocity of capital in order to satisfy products and services, this is basic economics, then you will get a little bit of a stagnation in growth. Banks need to come to the table, but not all of them know how to innovate, and they shouldn't. They ought to be curating the best technology solutions and offering them to their customers. And they need to be looking at their customers from the standpoint of how do we make them wealthy and grow. But that, going back to the Bono and the Bob Geldof comment, is not a comfortable thing to talk about 1.1 billion black people on a landmass, because we're still thinking about trying to help the worst of them.
Right.
But from a top-down perspective, ecosystem is addressed in such a way that everybody can be included. Again, the democracy of opportunity. And I think that if Ovamba were to keep doing what we're doing and seek partners to join us to do that, with technology at the fore, we might begin to see a closing of the ranks where we've got these gaps right now.
Okay, so I wanted you to speak maybe from a personal level, maybe from a business perspective, but what's the craziest thing you've seen in Davos?
Somebody in a t-shirt, and I found that shocking. It's really cold. That's the craziest thing. Now, today is day one.
True.
I did see some really beautiful prosthesis over in the main Congress area. It stopped me in my tracks. It made me realize that 3D printing is probably going to be talked about in the history books as the second time mankind invented the wheel. Because we can print and make things that solve problems so very quickly, whether it is additional storage space that is climate controlled in a place where there would never be any because you can't afford to bring resources to build, or whether it is creating limbs for individuals to be able to walk around and feel like equals to everybody else. But seeing that there at the Congress Hall, it's the first thing I saw. I actually stopped in my tracks. I think it's the reason I was almost slightly late to get here.
Now we've got the truth.
Now you got the
Now,
truth.
finally, the World Economic Forum's motto is improving the state of the world. So I'd love to hear your thought on what evidence do you see of that?
Wow. Please don't judge me as sappy. When I think about, I believe that the emotional response to improvement can be reflected in how we view finance. The state of the world is something that all of us should be concerned about. But when I see things like women joining together to do STEM studies for children, when I see individuals, not just here, but all over the place. When I see technology being used to bring people together in partnerships, but they will probably never meet each other, but it doesn't matter. When I see the enablement of blockchain and smart contracts and cryptocurrencies in order to create economic benefit for everybody else, it's a little bit like looking back at Star Trek and saying, hey, you got it all right. The transporter is still working. These are the things that make me excited and happy. But more than anything, and I selfishly say this with no shame whatsoever, seeing Africans with an opportunity to become global citizens and included at the table, all because of the fact that we're removing some of the old narratives. We're developing friendships over Facebook. We're finding more commonalities amongst human beings than there are differences. And we're finding people talk about the really hard things that keep us apart because we stay silent. Me Too movement, Black Lives Matter, making sure that anti-Semitism is completely squashed in places, preventing people doing harm to each other because they want to attach to the old hierarchy that you can only feel better if somebody else is worse. We need a level playing field. And it's I'm beginning to see that in so many different places.
Viola, thank you very much for stopping by the Hub Culture studio here in Davos 2019. And I'm Edie Lush.
It was lovely to talk to you.